So, Roger, please welcome, and why don't you start off by telling everyone a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me on your episode today. Well, my name is Roger Catchpole. I'm the managing director of Stowe Healthcare. Stowe Healthcare is a company I founded about a dozen years ago now. Um, Actually, I probably got into healthcare more by accident than anything else. I owned a building that was rented out as a nursing home, and that nursing home went into administration. So the first care home business I got into was actually buying a nursing home in administration, which got into trouble, and taking on a turnaround project there. And actually, that really formed the basis for what Stowe Healthcare has become in terms of our unique selling point. I suppose we've built a track record of taking on troubled homes. I've bought homes from large corporate portfolios. I've bought homes from independent operators, but homes that for one reason or another, whether it may have been a lack of investment, may have been challenges with management, haven't been a success, and trying to find a way to deliver high quality care in those settings. The first three homes we took on are all rated outstanding now. And the other homes in our portfolio, we aim for outstanding. It's impossible to guarantee an outstanding rating, but we hope on our worst day in a Stowe Healthcare home, we are good.
Wow, that's terrific. Now, let's dig into this a little bit more. So, it's to an outside, it might seem like one big challenge to make this turnaround and to have the confidence you can do it. So, tell me how you go about it. From that first point, that first element where you're sourcing, let's say, a home that would be a right fit for you. How have you gone about that?
Well, I mean, to be honest, there isn't, I would say, a shortcut. There isn't a kind of magic one that we can go and wave to turn a care home around. I think what it generally comes down to is effort. And what I would say with my company that I run with my fellow director, Ruth French, is that we work extremely hard and we care passionately about the care we deliver. So when we're looking for a home, we're trying to find a home that we think for one reason or another has failed, but that has potential. We really think we can make a success of that. So obviously location's important, the capacity of the home, but actually many of the homes that we've acquired, they're not necessarily homes that people would look at and say that's kind of beautiful and shiny and new. The homes that we have, we may look at and say, well, we think this home has huge potential, but it looks a little rough around the edges, and it just needs, for example, a home that's coming out of a portfolio from a corporate, perhaps it just needs a higher level of capital expenditure because it's an older building. That doesn't mean that we're looking for lower quality facilities. We're looking for excellent facilities. We're looking for 100% en suites in all of our homes, and as high a level of wet room en suites as possible. So we're not looking for a home that we can't make high quality, but perhaps it isn't in that state we take it on. So it's really perhaps the diamond in the rough or an ugly duckling where people look at it and from the roadside there's not much curb appeal and people think, well, that has a bad reputation. But actually, from our perspective, if we take on a home that's had a lot of challenges, the only way is up, really. And you have to just be prepared to kind of get into the trenches and work hard. When we take on a home in that situation, we often find that we've got some staff left in that home that are so dedicated to the residents that they just wouldn't leave no matter how bad things got. So usually there's a core of staff who want to do their best, perhaps just haven't had the resources or training to do so, and there's also residents in the home. So from a financial perspective, it's a slightly different proposition than perhaps opening a new home or taking on a home that's previously closed and trying to recommission it.
Yeah, I see.
And I think we've got between us, and it's quite interesting, Adam. Like, we don't work together professionally, but I, know you and your ideas through the industry, which I've always thought are quite unique. And actually, in some ways, kind of tie in with my own thoughts there. Our marketing has to be a bit more of a guerrilla effort. I'm not one that thinks that we take over a home and do, a fancy glossy advert in a magazine, and that's somehow going to fill our home. We know that what's most important to us is word of mouth, personal referrals and professional referrals within a
Mm,
community.
mm,
And actually, and a lot of the analysis within the industry will confirm this, but people don't tend to travel too far for care. We do have people who have perhaps come a long way to stay in one of our homes, but their family normally live nearby us.
mm,
So you really do need to build fantastic relationships within your local area. The
mm,
reputation matters greatly. And I think when someone's placing their loved one in your care or choosing care for themselves, they have to have some level of trust. And if they know someone who's been in one of your homes, or their GP
mm.
understands the care you deliver, or
Yeah.
they can gain confidence through social workers within their community, that really helps us turn around a home that's been struggling and turn it into a successful home.
Yeah, fascinating. And tell me a little bit more about when you might be looking at a home to acquire, and is there any reasons why you might, I'm sure there are, but just give us an idea of those times when you will say, no, it's not quite a right fit. Are there occasions like that?
Yeah, there certainly are homes. I mean, it's been a strange 2 years. We've all
Mm,
been working so hard to keep our residents safe with the pandemic, that it's been hard to think about growth. Although we have grown as a company and taken on a home during the pandemic, and
yeah.
are in the process of taking on further homes at the moment. But I think for us, because we're not a large corporate, because we're independently owned, we don't necessarily have vast resources just to go and buy the home that's advertised in the kind of national media through the largest agents. Often the homes that we're finding are the homes that perhaps aren't that interesting to other people, or the homes that aren't even on the market. We certainly have kind of gone through the process where we've acquired homes that weren't being offered for sale just because we think that it fits with us in terms of the facility, the capacity of the facility, the local area, and the business model we have. And I think my background prior to coming into healthcare was marketing and business. I have a master's in marketing, and I have an MBA with a concentration in finance. I spent a lot of my time within the property development world prior coming into healthcare. So I was used to buying sites, um, often bare land or that sort of thing. But I was used to that type of transaction. So for me, being able to understand demographics of an area, and what would work for our business model,
Mm,
it
yeah.
wasn't easy, but I understood that quite well. And I think also as a company, we're quite clear in terms of what we can offer and also what we can't offer. We are
Mm.
not, everything for all people in terms of care. We don't deliver every different type of care within the sector. But I think we try and be the best we can within our region in nursing, residential, and memory care.
Yeah, yeah, fascinating. And when mentioned about getting into the trenches, and then when you acquire making these changes, tell me a little bit more about that, about your process, about what you'll be looking at, and how you come up with a plan, and all your plans for the turnaround, I guess, probably sketched out and made before the acquisition. Tell me a little bit on the challenges that you might face in that turnaround, perhaps with cultural changes, for example. Tell us kind of the pitfalls and what you have to be aware of when you go around doing these turnaround processes.
I think culture is the key change that we have to make. But if we just take a step back
Mm,
to start with, because and most of your listeners will realise how fragmented the UK care market is. So we do have a number of large providers out there that have 2, 3, 4, 500 homes, but actually compared to the total amount of care facilities in the UK, it's very small. And actually, the vast majority of care providers in the UK are single home operators. And I think the pandemic has probably shone a light on that. That's been quite harsh in the fact that it's very difficult to run a single home and keep up with the changes in legislation, particularly in recent times. It's become more and more of a challenge to do that. And I think from our perspective, the hardest change that we had to make is when we went from one home to two homes. So when we were a single home operator, we were able to give it our complete focus and be there every day. And then the real change came in going from one home to two homes. that was kind of, I suppose, the largest growing pains, but also a really good lesson. And when we went from one home to two home, we built what we considered a positive culture in our first home, ways that we like to operate in terms of how we recruited staff, how we trained our staff, how we managed a home, how we worked with our residents and their families, both in terms of recruiting to come into the home, and also supporting them to live their best lives once they're in the home. But when we then had to move that to two homes, it was different. And I think at that point there was a lot of learning that we had to do in terms of putting in processes to make a home successful when you can't necessarily be hands-on as an owner every day.
Got it. Yeah.
And I think actually we then created a group structure at that point, which has served us very well during the pandemic, because what it's enabled us to do is to support those homes in a really well-resourced way. So we didn't have PPE challenges because we had staff on phones every day, 7 days a week at the beginning of the pandemic, sourcing PPE. So we were large enough to have a structure in place to support our homes, but we were still small enough to be very agile in terms of the changes we made. But coming back to culture, that is the key part. It probably took us 3 or 4 years to really try and work out what our identity was as a provider when we first started, and to embed the culture that we wanted in our first home. And then when we went to expand it to a second home, we were very cognizant that they had a different culture, and we were trying to be very respectful when we went in about what they'd done previously and make allowances for that. And I suppose because of that, the turnaround of our second home was much slower than subsequent homes, because I think what we learned quite quickly is the home's culture needed changing, otherwise it would have been a success to start with. And when we go into a home that's had challenges, actually what they really want is to see good leadership and be supported to embrace the Stoke healthcare culture rather than stay with what they were. So I think what we've been very clear is to try and identify what we stand for, what we expect in terms of the standards that we deliver, and then try and support people through training to meet those standards.
Yeah, fascinating. And when you've gone through that process, have you found what happens? I guess sometimes it does happen. You come across resistance, or how do you communicate? What do you find is the best way to communicate the culture that you have? How do you initiate that change? How do you bring in the momentum to initiate that change?
Well, it's hard at the start, when you're growing as a company, because there isn't really a huge track record to point back to. The further we grow, and now a dozen years in, we've been recognised regionally and also nationally several times as a top care provider in the UK and a best employer. So it's certainly easier now that we can go back and say, well, here's recognition of why what we do is considered good within the industry. We've also got other homes where we can encourage people to come and look at what we've done previously and say, okay, well, here's where this home started, and here's where it's progressed to now. And that's easier to get people's buy-in once they can see something tangible. So when they can see that change and say, oh, well, I knew about that home before, and I understand how that's changed, people, I think, they believe what we say. At the start, it was very hard because you haven't asked people to believe something they can't see. Whereas now we're further down the line, we don't have to ask people to believe in a mythical unicorn. We can just direct them to go and visit some of our other homes and build up confidence by looking at the facilities, by speaking to the staff, and for potential residents and their families to speak to our other residents to see what their personal experience has been.
Yeah, fascinating. Great. I know that at the top of this episode, we talked about the second element that we particularly want to focus on today, which of course is in alignment with everything we've been talking about right now, is this relationship and partnership with the CCGs and your commissioners. And I think for you, Roger, there was some particular initiatives that have resulted as a result of the pandemic, and that's something that you were quite keen to share today. So perhaps we could just move on to that. Tell me a little bit about what initiative you have brought on during the pandemic with particular CCGs and commissioners.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Well, I think we're not necessarily unique, but historically we've appreciated that we need to build good reputations locally, and that's the key to being a successful home: recruiting staff, keeping a high occupancy within the home. And the majority of our homes are, we have a high level of private fee players within our homes, but we always look to work within our community to support anyone that we can. We do feel that we're an integrated part of our community rather than isolated from that community. So historically, we've always looked to support the counties we operate in, and the CCGs were with kind of winter bed capacity issues. So often during kind of peak seasons within the winter, we'll work and take contracts with those providers so that we can support them to make sure that hospitals are safe to operate and have available beds. And I think that then kind of drew through to where we were in March 2020. And really, I try not to judge what any care provider did during the pandemic, because what I would say is everyone was doing their best.
Yeah.
And I think there was an awful lot of uncertainty, and people chose different paths to get through that, and for good reasons. So I don't have criticisms of what anyone else did. All I know is what we decided to do at Stowe Healthcare is that we felt that we couldn't isolate ourselves from the needs of the community during these first waves. So we reached out to the county councils and the clinical commissioning groups in our local areas in Suffolk, Essex, and Norfolk, and just said, look, here is what we have to support you. So, initially that was in terms of, okay, what standard bed capacity have we got that we could offer you? And then also we started working on kind of emergency contingency planning in case hospitals were literally overrun, as to what else we could do, spare capacity in terms of additional registration capacity, in terms of how we would be able to get facilities ready to accept more people than we usually would to support them, because we felt that it was our responsibility to look after everyone in our community, not just the people who were in our home at that point. And we also felt that was the best way to keep a viable business to support our current residents. So if one of our homes wasn't open, it wasn't going to be very, very useful for the people who were living in it. We had to keep those homes viable, and we also felt this greater need to support our community. So we went out, we looked at every spare bed we had, and we worked ways to offer those to the CCGs and the county councils who partnered together. So we then formed partnerships in Suffolk, Essex, Norfolk to work with these people to give them everything spare that we could to help them, and that proved tremendously successful. Firstly, in helping them with real pinch points within the hospitals during those early waves, pre-vaccines, in the early variants where they really were under tremendous stress. And yes, it put pressure on us as well, but I think we just felt we were all in this together, and we needed to do what we could, and that's something we could do.
Yeah.
So we partnered there, but the positive side is that we went into the first wave and we went into the second wave with 100% occupancy across our whole group. So we were working very hard. Staffing was obviously very challenging, trying to keep everyone going, but we did that, and we felt we were doing the right thing within our community. It's really cemented. We had a lot of existing relationships with GP surgeries, with the county council, so adult social services teams, with the CCGs. But this, I think, took our relationships to a new level. And I suppose the culmination of that was in us opening a designated setting during the pandemic to support the discharge of COVID positive patients from hospital who weren't critically ill but couldn't return to their usual care setting.
So, yes, and tell me a bit more about this designated setting and how it was formulated, and what parameters of usage it was for. So
it was something that we'd looked at right at the start, and we weren't quite sure we had a facility where we could properly provide a designated setting without putting other residents at risk. We were about to buy a home in January 2020, and just as we were about to exchange, obviously the pandemic hit, which caused a lot of uncertainty. That purchase got delayed, but we ended up completing in the October 2020. And when we went in there, within that facility, there was a separate unit which lent itself to be able to be run separately. So, the council that operated in had asked us several times if this was something that we could offer for them, if there's any way we could do this. And in the first wave, we just couldn't. We didn't have a facility where we felt we could safely manage those residents' care without putting our existing residents at risk. Now we had a home with a separate, completely physically separate unit, and within 3 weeks from agreeing that we would provide a designated setting, we opened a designated setting fully staffed with as a nursing unit from zero staff on day one. So it was a fairly crazy 21 days to do that, to go through work with the CQC, to go through their registration and inspection process to become a designated setting. But at that stage, it was something that was absolutely critical. The hospitals were bursting at the seams, and we were really pleased that we could do that. And we still have that designated setting open today.
I can imagine that was all kind of quick fire negotiations, but a really vital service. Just going back, I guess, to how you've done these turnarounds for these for the care homes that you've acquired, and then that relationship with the commissioners and how you've developed those when you do that turnaround. Tell me a little more about that, about how you go about it and how you communicate with your local authorities and CCGs when you go through that process, of that turnaround process.
Well, I think what we always have is a very open relationship with all the people we're involved in. So if we take over an existing home, there will likely be some residents placed there through social services. There will likely be some residents placed through local CCGs, as well as private residents in a home. So there's lots of stakeholders that we're already having to communicate with. And then if you add into the mix the Care Quality Commission, who have likely had some concerns over this service that we're taking over because of the position it's in, there's a lot of people who want information and want to have a conversation with you. And I think what we've always thought is we need to be open and transparent and honest about everything that's gone on previously and where we want to take it. So I think by doing that, we build confidence in those professionals that we work with, that not everything will be perfect. And I'm certainly not here to tell you that we're the best care provider in the world and we get things right all the time. We don't. What I say about how we operate is that if mistakes get made, we will put them right. And we're always doing our best to try and get things correct. So when we take over a home that's had some difficulties, it's building a relationship with the CQC. So they now have a good understanding within our region of how we operate and what we do, which I think gives them confidence when we're trying to take over a registration for a home, that things will be done right, that we were not going to brush anything under the carpet, that we welcome them in. And what I would say about the CQC is that they are not perfect. They do make mistakes themselves, but they're not out there trying to cause trouble unnecessarily. They're trying to make sure that the care delivered in care settings is appropriate for the people in that setting. And whenever we've had an inspection, we may not agree with all of the outcomes, but we've learned something. And there's little things within that report that help us improve how we operate. And I think if you deal with an inspection in the right way, and rather than look for a confrontation, you look to see how can we collaborate, how can we learn, how can we improve, you do get better. So we're always trying to learn, we're always open to new ideas. And if someone has a better way of doing a particular part of operating a care home, that we would love to see how they do it and learn. In the same respect, we love to bring other operators in, have conversations with them. My fellow director is now director of the Outstanding Society, and that's a good place where there's a lot of information sharing about best practice or how you can improve practice, and we're very open to that. And I think that type of relationship has been the same with the CCGs, the social services within the county councils, local GPs, and that's enabled us to perhaps make changes quicker because we're all trying to pull in the same direction rather than antagonize each other or feel we have conflicting interests. We really don't. Our interests should align if we're all doing things right.
Yeah. That's great. And I'm curious now, we're now in March, end of March 2022. What's kind of like top of your priority list in terms of where you're looking to go to next, kind of what's on your mind, what's the biggest challenge you have as an operator, which is not necessarily keeping you awake at night, but something that's like top of your mind. But what might it be right now?
Well, we're a family-owned business and a family-operated business. I think that comes first and foremost in terms of how we run things. So it's funny, at the beginning of the business, when we were first starting, you don't necessarily have a lot of resources to invest and improve things. Where we've grown, we've built a reputation, and I think that people understand what we're doing, and we get a lot of phone calls about investment for growing faster. But that's not really what we're about. Our focus really is on premium care. We're trying to deliver the absolute best care possible.
Yes.
And that's where this focus on family, that comes in. I've had my own loved ones live in our care homes, and when you've got your own family, it does become personal. So we look at it from that perspective. Each time we're looking at a home or we're looking to grow, we're looking to improve everything. We don't want, it's not a case with us where we say, okay, well, we're going to take an investment and we want to grow as quickly as possible. What we would like to do is be able to deliver great care across our community in the east of England. And I think in terms of how we're growing, we're looking quite specifically at the care needs of our community. So last summer we opened our first memory centre for those people living with dementia and other memory issues, which we're finding increasingly people are coming into care later perhaps than they would have done a decade ago. Their needs are perhaps quite different because of that. And a lot of people's needs can't be met in a standard nursing or standard residential care setting. And we're looking at ways that we can try and address that. So we opened our first memory centre, as I said, last summer. It's proved a huge success. We're following a Montessori model of care, which is very different from the care style that we've delivered in our other homes. It really is again about homemakers within a family in that community. But the outcomes from that have been tremendous. And just listening to the stories of families whose loved ones have moved into our first memory centre have been really heartwarming in terms of the difference we're able to make to those people's lives. So looking forward now as a company, we're looking where else. We've got a couple of memory centres in the pipeline now in other parts of East Anglia where we can meet the need that we know is there. And it also helps us when we are taking people into care, perhaps into one of our existing residential and nursing homes, that we know we could meet that person's lifetime needs. And what we don't like to do in our group is take people into our care that we feel there'd be a point where their needs would change to an extent that we couldn't care for them anymore. I think it's really important. And it's the same with funding. If someone comes into a Stowe healthcare home, they're never going to be asked to leave because of money. People's funding situation does change, but once people have committed to come to us and we've committed to accepting them, we see that as a long-term commitment. So certainly the memory side of care, I think, is a big unserved need.
No, 100%. Well, that's great, Roger. I wonder, is there anything that we've not covered during this episode that you feel you'd like to convey?
Well, I think it's staffing is a challenge for everyone. We're very cognizant of that. Everyone in the industry, as Brexit has been very, very difficult for the care sector in terms of availability of staff. And that's caused us to try and make changes in a few ways. I think we always felt we were a very fair payer within the industry. We didn't lose staff because we weren't competitive there, but we have certainly been trying to look at different ways where we can reward our staff for their hard work, because during the pandemic, honestly, they've been amazing, utterly amazing at how they've stepped up to support the residents in our homes. They've gone over and above. So we've tried to bear that in mind when we're looking at how we reward them in terms of pay and holiday, etc. So we're now an accredited real living wage provider. I think we're only the second care provider in the east of England to be accredited there. So we're very proud that we've been able to do that to make sure that everyone within our company is being paid enough that they can live safely. So it's been important for us to do that. We're also focusing very hard, and while traditionally we have a very high level of UK staffing, we are very aware of the fact there simply aren't enough nursing staff within the UK to meet the demand within both the NHS and adult social care. And the debacle around mandatory vaccinations has made that worse. Although we had great take up within our particular group, it's just been a big industry challenge. But what we're having to do as a provider is look at how we can work to sponsor overseas nurses to come in to guarantee that we can fill vacancies and also plan for the future growth. I do hope that in 10 years' time, the situation will be different, where we do put incentives out there to train our own staff to become nurses and to follow that through. But we're going to, as an industry, we're all facing a very difficult time at the moment, and we're working very hard to make sure that firstly we reward our staff so that we can retain them, and secondly we can then go and attract enough people so that we can staff safely, and we generally at Stowe Healthcare have very good staffing levels to deliver premium care, but then we can go forward and grow with the knowledge that we'll be able to staff homes.
Yeah, I noted that you've talked about the recruitment and retention issue, which is yes, for certainly high on the agenda for I guess all operators at the moment. So that's
but that comes down to culture again, and the type of business. I think as a family business, people know who they work for. They know what we stand for, that we know we're all trying to deliver the best care possible, and getting that culture right certainly helps. But in a situation like we're in now, that alone is not enough.
Yeah, sure. Roger, listen, thank you so much. Now, finally, if people would like to get in touch with you, any particular questions, how can they best do that?
The best thing to do is go to our website, www.stowehealthcare.co.uk. That's STOW healthcare.co.uk. You can contact us through there. The phone number for our homes and for our group offices on there, and also there's contact forms or email addresses to contact us if you have any questions. But no, as I said, I think we try and always do our best. Nothing's ever perfect, but I think efforts helped us kind of get where we are at the moment.
Sure. Roger, thank you so much.
Thanks for your time. Take care.
Bye-bye.